until it came to the Neptune statue, and I was in on that right from the word go. And it was quite a concept, actually. First I knew of it was I went out there and climbed this rather high ground. It's really a glorified sand dune, I suppose. And looked around me, and of course the whole of Two Rocks was just laid out in front of me. And so first of all, the sculptor, Mark Labousse, he was a character and a half. I had to go and see him in order to see what his ideas were, and he actually made a model, a scale model. And so we took that back to the office, and as I say, he was quite a character. He was a big man, and he had a big voice, and as with most artists, his head was up in the clouds and his feet were way off the ground. But he was such a character, you took notice of him, and he worked hard. And he used to have this tiny little, what was the name of it? Subaru. It was only a tiny one, but it had a four-wheel drive. And it wasn't an off-road vehicle at all, it was a little saloon. And somehow or other he used to manage to squeeze himself inside this thing and go tearing up this sand dune. And he'd be jumping up and down inside to get a hold, because otherwise he'd slip all the way back down again, you know. So he'd be jumping up and down trying to keep this thing going. He used to make it at the top, he used to yell out a huge shout, "Done it again!" And so with quite an ingenious method, which was none of my business, it was the engineer who was in charge, came out with this way of following the contours of the scale model onto paper, so that we could get a series of rings, structural rings, going all the way up from the base right up to the top of the head. And I suppose the best thing you can say, they were hoops, but of course they were all shapes following the contours, and they were doubled with little tiny struts in between them, so they were about 100 centimetres, or it may even be more. It may have been 150 centimetres apart, I can't remember, it's a long while ago. And that was made of reinforcing steel rods, and that had to be fixed to a frame, so it was a steel frame, and that again was built to accept the weird contours of these hoops. And if anybody had gone up there and seen it, they thought, what on earth is that? And a lot of people would come up to the site and say, what's that going to be? What is it? Is it a new building? And I heard sometimes you say, well, eventually we hope to fire rockets off it and things like that, or it was an oil rig and things like that. But most people weren't taken in, but some were. And then there was a mesh fitted to the inside ring and another mesh fitted to the outside ring, and concrete was then fired onto it. And Mark Labousse was there all the time, I was there all the time, and I also used to go down to where these things were being made in Osborne Park to check and make sure that they followed the contours, because the contours were actually painted out onto the floor of the workshop, and then the hoops were fitted to the contours as they went up. Of course, they started with the top ones first, and then gradually came down. So they were able to fit the top ones first, and then come on down. So they were made on the floor, and I used to have to go out there and check that it was all made to the correct shapes and sizes. and then they were taken up by a lorry to Two Rocks, and I used to supervise the erection of those things, and so on. Consequently, I got to know the Japanese manager there, who was in charge of the whole site, with his entourage, and one of the problems with working with the Japanese was that it was very hard to get a decision out of them, because it always had to. They seemed to want to have a committee. Nobody would take responsibility. Nobody would say yes or no. I'll have to refer this back. So it would go back to Tokyo, and then the answer would come back, and all the time we're chomping on the bit because we want to get the darn thing finished. But I can remember going up there on the first really hot day and watching the concrete being shot on to this stuff. It was a very, very dry mix, and but even then some of it used to spray off in all directions. But I was standing right on top of this sand dune, and as always at Two Rocks there's always a very, very strong wind, and there was a very hot day, and I was sweating like a pig, running around all around the site, going backwards and forwards, up and down, and checking on the inside, make sure that the concrete wasn't coming right the way through. And anyway, I finished the day, and I got in the car to drive home, and I thought, oh gosh, I tell you what, I'll nip in there and get a couple of bottles of beer. And I did, and I found it hard to get out of the seat, and my legs were sticking to it, and when I had a look there was blood all down the back of my legs. I'd been sandblasted, and I was literally stuck to the car seat. It didn't half hurt getting them up. And so I got an old shirt that I found and put it on the seat, so that I went inside, and my wife said, "What on earth have you done? Oh, your back of your legs covered in blood." And it was hard to believe, actually, just what I now know what steel feels like when it's been sandblasted. It's not pleasant at all. But it was quite something to watch the two boats out at sea, tacking backwards and forwards, and things like that.
On the statue,
yeah.
So Mark would have been up there doing the final touches as it was shot on?
Oh yes, and he was also there because he had to fill in the muscle parts of it, for example. Although we had these hoops, you couldn't make a hoop every 30 centimetres apart. They had to be much more than that. And so he was there again, not all the time, but once they had put on what they thought was sufficient concrete, then he used to say, right, now I want a bit more put on here, because to flesh out the arm and the muscles of the arm, to flesh out the beard, so those sort of things. So he was there, and he was asking for extra concrete to be put on, and no, not like that, I want it just like this, smooth that bit off a bit here, and a little bit more on here, and all the time he'd be stepping back and looking at it from a distance, and something I'd seen him film, but I didn't think actually happened. He's standing there with his thumb in front of his eye and measuring things, and I thought, gosh, it really does happen.